I knew something was wrong the moment I heard the crunch, this sharp, sickening, unmistakable crunch that doesn't belong in a quiet suburban morning. I rushed out the front door, barely wearing one sock, and there it was, my hedge, the one I'd spent 15 years shaping, standing, and arguing with squirrels over, completely annihilated. Not trimmed, not bumped, annihilated. It looked like a tank had rolled through my yard on its way to invade the neighbor's bird feeders, and right there in the dirt, shining like a trophy, was a chunk of someone's headlight. Perfect. Because nothing says, good morning, like discovering your yard has been used as an off-road testing site. My heart was pounding. My coffee went cold in my hand, and the only thought racing through my head was, here we go again. Because in any normal neighborhood, this would be a weird accident, but in an HOA neighborhood run by Karen, the self-appointed queen of petty. Oh, this was absolutely personal. She wanted a fight, and unfortunately for her, that morning, she picked the wrong man to mess with. Before we dive in, drop your location and local time in the comments and, hey, if HOA chaos is your favorite kind of chaos, go ahead and subscribe. You'd think after finding my hedge flattened like a crime scene in a gardening horror movie, things would calm down. But no. This was an HOA neighborhood where common sense goes to die and pettiness multiplies like rabbits, and standing at the center of it all was Karen, the HOA president and full-time enthusiast of making everyone else's life miserable. Let me explain something about Karen. She's the kind of person who measures the height of your grass with a ruler and takes pictures of trash cans that linger at the curb for more than 8 minutes. A woman who genuinely believes her clipboard is a weapon of mass authority. She once fined a neighbor because his Halloween pumpkin expressed an emotionally threatening aura. I wish I were joking. So when my hedge got destroyed for the first time 2 weeks ago, I tried to be optimistic. Could have been a delivery truck, I told myself. Could have been a teenager learning to drive. But by the second time it happened, optimism packed its bags, called an Uber, and left. And by the third time, oh, I knew exactly what was going on. Karen had been nagging me about that hedge for months. Apparently it was non-compliant with HOA aesthetic standards, which, translated from Karen speak, meant, I personally don't like it, and therefore it must be destroyed. She hated that hedge like it owed her money. She once suggested I cut it down because it disrupts the visual harmony of the street. Meanwhile, she had a lawn flamingo so bright it could guide airplanes during fog. After the fourth incident, the glorious tank-level destruction I witnessed that morning, I marched back inside and decided to monitor my property like a paranoid raccoon. I set up my lawn chair on the porch, armed with a thermos of extra-strong coffee and a level of determination usually reserved for Olympic athletes. If someone wanted to keep playing bumper cars with my landscaping, they were going to have to do it while staring directly into my annoyed, middle-aged face. But here's the thing. Whoever was driving that mystery SUV had timing skills that would make a magician jealous. Every time I looked away, even briefly, something happened. I went inside to microwave my coffee. Bam. Fresh tire marks. I took a phone call. Bam. Hedge leaning like it had survived a hurricane. I once sneezed so hard I closed my eyes for 5 seconds, and I swear when I opened them again, the leaves were slightly more crooked. It was getting ridiculous. I even tried asking neighbors if they'd seen anything. No luck. Everyone suddenly became either blind or mute. Mr. Dawson pretended he didn't understand English, even though I've heard him yell at his TV every football season. Mrs. Morales said she didn't want to get involved in political matters, which was a strange way to describe my hedge being repeatedly murdered. And old Miss Henderson, who normally saw everything that moved within a 5-mile radius, just shook her head and whispered, "They come at odd hours, dear. Blink and they're gone." I asked. She just shuffled back inside like she'd said too much. Fantastic. My neighborhood now had a mysterious hedge assassin team, and nobody wanted to admit they existed. Meanwhile, Karen kept escalating her paper war. Every morning, it was another HOA violation notice stabbed into my front door like she was auditioning for a dramatic fencing scene. Hedge height out of compliance. Hedge shape inconsistent. Hedge poses possible safety risk. That last one almost made me choke. A safety risk? The only threat was to anyone driving a car straight into it, which now that I think about it may have been her whole plan. I tried talking to her once, hoping we could use words like adults instead of car parts and passive-aggressive notices. I caught her during her afternoon power stride walk. the one she takes with her nose tilted just high enough to smell her own superiority. "Karen," I said, "my Hedge keeps getting hit, 4 times now. I think someone's doing it on purpose." She nodded sympathetically, though her eyes said she was enjoying this way too much. "Yes, I've seen the damage. It's quite unfortunate. Another reason to consider removing it, Josh?" "It clearly doesn't belong here." I stared at her, trying to process the fact that she was blaming the Hedge for getting run over. That's like blaming a mailbox for getting punched. "You think the Hedge is the problem?" I asked. "Well, something is attracting all these accidents," she replied with a tight smile, "like gravity. And your SUV?" I didn't say that part out loud, but judging by the way she raised an eyebrow, maybe she heard it anyway. From that moment, something in me switched. I wasn't angry, no, that had been earlier. By now, I was in a new emotional state I can only describe as fed up, but ready to make it everyone else's problem. If Karen wanted a war, she was going to get one. But I wasn't just going to fight back, I was going to win. And to win, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. First step, figure out who was driving the SUV. Second step, figure out why they wanted that Hedge gone so badly. Third step, survive whatever HOA nonsense came next. So I did what any rational adult would do. I turned my front window into a surveillance post. I rearranged furniture so I could sit comfortably with a clear view of the street. I stocked up on snacks, because you can't do stakeouts hungry. I even tried binoculars, but they made me look like a weird neighborhood birdwatcher. So I switched to discreet glances every few minutes. Still nothing. Days passed. The Hedge remained unmurdered for a record-breaking 72 hours, almost long enough for me to consider optimism again. But then came the kicker. It happened one evening while I was tightening a bolt on my truck. I had been outside for hours, keeping watch, but figured stepping inside for 2 minutes to grab a different wrench couldn't possibly hurt. You know where this is going. I stepped inside, found the wrench, walked back out, and just as I reached the driveway, I heard it, the low rumble of an engine, building fast. I looked up, headlights were barreling toward my yard, and in that moment, I realized 2 things. Karen, or whoever she sent, had been watching me just as closely as I'd been watching them. I was not dealing with amateurs. I was dealing with professionals in the sport of drive into Josh's Hedge. The SUV swerved, accelerated, and slammed into the Hedge like it was trying to win a prize for most destructive neighborhood menace. And standing there with my wrench in hand, watching my Hedge die for the 4th time, I had only one clear thought. This is it. This is the moment I stopped being polite, because if they wanted to keep driving into my property, I was going to give them something unforgettable to drive into. I wish I could tell you that after the 4th time my Hedge got flattened, the universe gave me a break, maybe a moment to breathe, a moment to gather my sanity, a moment to question my life choices. But no, this is an HOA story. In HOA stories, the universe isn't your friend. The universe is run by Karen. Still, I was determined. I became a man on a mission, a dramatically over-caffeinated, sleep-deprived, middle-aged man on a mission, but a man on a mission nonetheless. I'd had enough gaslighting, enough violation notices, enough Hedge slaughter, enough pretending this was all one big coincidence. So I did what any logical homeowner would do. I launched Operation Catch the Hedge Assassin. My plan was simple: sit, watch, wait, and maybe glare at suspicious vehicles with the intensity of a raccoon guarding a trash can. I set up in my living room where I had the perfect angle through the front window, just enough visibility to see anyone coming down the street, but not enough for them to notice me. Unless they had night vision goggles, which honestly wouldn't surprise me at this point. Every hour or so, I'd rotate positions like I was in some kind of strange suburban tactical simulation: kitchen window, porch chair, garage doorway, couch, back to porch. I looked like a security guard who took himself way too seriously. But nothing happened. Not a single suspicious car, not a single mysterious rumble, not even a bored teenager driving too fast. I was starting to think Karen and her squad had gone on vacation, or maybe I'd accidentally scared them off with my unhinged man staring into the street at 3 a.m. aesthetic. Then one night it finally happened. It was around 11:30. I had just told myself, "Josh, you absolute fool, go to sleep," when I heard it. A low, deep engine sound, not loud, almost polite, but heavy, purposeful, the kind of vehicle that doesn't drive so much as announce itself. I froze. There it was again, a slow rumble getting closer. I moved to the window as quietly as a man my age could move, which is to say, not quiet at all. My knee cracked twice, and I whispered, "Shut up," to it, like that would help. But hey, at least the engine outside was louder. The SUV came into view at the end of the street. Black, big, slow, suspiciously slow, like I'm casing your property slow. It crept toward my driveway, headlights dimmed just enough to look sneaky without being illegal. And honestly, if cars could smirk, this one would be grinning. I ducked behind the curtain, just enough to see without being seen. My heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon, which is funny because the last time I ran a marathon was never. Then right as the SUV reached my property line, the engine changed tone lower, tighter, like a predator getting ready to pounce. And pounce it did. It accelerated so fast, I swear it jumped forward. 1 second it was on the road, the next it was in mid-swerve, and then, crrraonch. I have never in my life heard a sound so aggressively destructive. I felt it in my teeth. I felt it in my wallet. I felt it in my soul. Branches snapped like they were auditioning for an action movie. Dirt exploded into the air. My Hedge, my poor, sweet Hedge went down harder than a folding chair at a wrestling match. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sprint outside. I wanted to throw a shoe at them, but I didn't move, because this time, I was watching. I finally caught them. The SUV backed up violently, the engine growling like it was offended the Hedge dared to exist in the first place. Then it swerved back onto the road and took off, like it had somewhere very illegal to be. And here's the part that really got me before speeding away. The driver paused for half a second. Not long, just long enough for me to see the silhouette inside. A figure, broad shoulders, not Karen. A man driving the SUV, a man doing Karen's dirty work, which honestly tracked Karen didn't strike me as someone who would personally commit hedge slaughter. She struck me as the kind of person who delegates hedge slaughter to someone else. The moment the SUV disappeared down the street, I rushed outside, adrenaline surging, heart pounding. I looked at my hedge, flattened worse than ever. The earth was torn up like someone had been digging for buried treasure with a bulldozer, and yet I felt triumphant, because right there in the dirt, next to all the fresh damage, was the evidence I needed. A large fragment of headlight casing, bigger than the last one, sharper, unique. I picked it up like it was a sacred artifact. This was it, the proof, the missing puzzle piece. Now, for normal people, seeing their hedge destroyed 4 times in 2 weeks would be the final straw. They'd cry, they'd move, they'd develop a hatred for SUVs, but not me. Oh no. This was the moment my brain flipped the switch from frustrated homeowner to petty mastermind. I walked inside, still holding the headlight piece, and sat at my kitchen table. I stared at it like it had insulted my mother. This means war, I whispered to myself, mostly because saying things out loud makes them feel more dramatic. I spent the next hour trying to piece together the timeline. They always came when I wasn't watching. They always struck suddenly. They always targeted the hedge. Not the mailbox, not the lawn, not the walkway. Why? What was so terrifying about a 10-foot strip of shrubbery? I thought back to all my interactions with Karen, the forced smile, the passive-aggressive comments, the, Josh, hedges are terribly outdated speech she gave me in July. The time she suggested I beautify my home by embracing minimalism, which I now realize was just a fancy way of saying, cut down your hedge so I get what I want. She had been dropping hints for months, soft pressure, then notices, then escalating harassment, and now, a drive-by demolition spree. This wasn't about aesthetics. This wasn't about HOA pride. This was personal or strategic, maybe both. But the SUV attack wasn't even the part that kept me awake that night. No. What kept me awake was the man inside the vehicle. His silhouette, the shape of his shoulders, the way he handled the car like he'd done this before. Whoever he wasn't acting alone. He wasn't acting randomly. He was acting with purpose. And the only person with motive was Karen. The good news, she had no idea I'd finally seen them. And as I sat there in my dim kitchen, my mind began crafting a beautifully petty, perfectly legal, and extremely satisfying plan. If they wanted to keep ramming their SUV into my hedge, I was going to make sure their next attempt ended very, very badly. Not for me, for them, people say revenge is a dish best served cold. Personally, I think revenge is a dish best served quietly, with a shovel, a flashlight, and a level of pettiness HOA presidents can only dream of. Because after watching that mystery SUV destroy my hedge for the 4th time, I didn't want justice, I wanted satisfaction. And satisfaction, for me, came in the form of one sentence. If they like driving into my hedge so much, let's make it interesting. I stood at my kitchen window with the headlight piece still in my hand, the way a detective in a crime movie holds the murder weapon, except instead of planning an arrest, I was planning what I now lovingly call Operation Surprise. Your SUV is now a pretzel. Step 1, gather supplies. Step 2, reinforce my hedge like it was about to go to war. Step 3, wait. Now, let me be clear, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I'm not a maniac. I just wanted the car to suffer, and if that car happened to belong to someone who had been repeatedly assaulting my landscaping like it owed them rent money, well, that's called karma, automotive karma. The next morning, I headed to the hardware store. I grabbed a bag of quick-set concrete, 4 steel rods, 2 landscaping stakes, strong enough to survive a tornado, and a pair of work gloves. The cashier gave me a look usually reserved for people who buy zip ties and shovels at midnight. "Big project," she asked. "You could say that," I replied, trying not to cackle. I drove home, smiling like a man who had lost his sanity but gained a purpose, and honestly, it felt great. That afternoon, once the nosy neighbors were inside watching daytime TV, and Karen was off doing whatever HOA presidents do when they're not harassing people, probably polishing her clipboard, I got to work. The key was subtlety. You don't build a trap out in the open. No, you build it like a suburban ninja. I started by pulling aside what was left of my hedge. It wasn't much, basically green confetti sprinkled across dirt, but it was enough to conceal what I needed to hide. I dug into the soil with a vengeance, muttering motivational phrases like, "This is for my sanity," and "Drive into this now, you lawn-destroying menace." Once the trench was deep enough, I planted the steel rods into the ground, angling them upward like fangs. Then I surrounded them with landscaping stones for extra reinforcement. I added concrete around the base to lock everything in place. If the SUV hit this again, it wasn't going to be pretty. I stood back, admiring my handiwork like Michelangelo staring at the Sistine Chapel, beautiful, deadly, petty, everything I wanted it to be. By the time I finished covering the whole thing with soil, bark, and what remained of the hedge, you couldn't tell anything had changed. It looked messy, defeated, exactly how Karen wanted it to look, which made it the perfect trap. That night, instead of my usual stakeout, I made a bold strategic choice. I went to bed. Nothing says, "I've set a trap for the HOA president's goon squad," like being so confident you sleep through it. But sleep didn't last long. At around 2:17 a.m., I woke up to a sound that can only be described as mechanical agony, the sort of noise that signals something extremely expensive just met something extremely unforgiving. Ring thud, double ring thud. It was beautiful. I jumped out of bed, didn't even bother putting on proper pants, and ran to the front door. And there, illuminated by my porch light, was the most magnificent sight I'd ever seen. The black SUV, half embedded in the ground, front bumper crushed like a soda can, hood folded, one wheel bent at a 30-degree angle that no wheel should ever experience. If the poor thing were alive, someone would have called animal control. And standing next to it, clutching his wrist, breathing heavily like he'd just taken a test he didn't study for, was Richard, Karen's husband. Of course, it was Richard. The universe may hate me, but at least it has comedic timing. I stepped onto the porch, crossing my arms like every disappointed father in every sitcom ever made. "Well," I said, "looks like you hit something." Richard spun around. Face pale, eyes wide, hair disheveled. He looked like a man who had just discovered gravity for the first time and taken it personally. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. Gesturing at the mangled SUV, I blinked at him. "Me. I didn't do anything. You did. You drove your 2-ton battering ram into my hedge." "Again? That wasn't a hedge," he snapped. "There's something under there." "Yeah, dirt," I replied casually. "You know, the thing landscaping grows in." He knew, I knew, he knew, I knew, he knew. It was a beautiful moment of mutual acknowledgement that he had been caught being stupid. Now, let me tell you something about Richard. He has big, I'm tough because my wife says I am, energy. The kind of guy who puffs his chest out during barbecues and then throws his back out lifting a cooler. And right now, with his SUV jammed into my property like a failed Tetris move, he had never looked smaller. He jabbed a shaky finger at me. You're paying for this, I laughed. Not a polite laugh, a full, hearty, oh, you sweet summer child. Laugh, Richard, I said. You've hit my hedge 4 times, 4. And every single time, you and Karen pretended it was some kind of freak accident. But now that the hedge bites back, suddenly it's my fault. He opened his mouth but realized he had absolutely nothing to say. Not a single brain cell came to his defense. Poor guy. Within 10 minutes, Karen arrived, marching down the driveway like an angry flamingo in slippers. She saw the SUV, she saw the hedge, she saw me, and her face collapsed into an expression I wish I could frame. What happened? She demanded. Well, I said, looks like someone ran into my hedge again. For once, she had no clipboard, no smug smile, no Regulation 14B subsection 3 speech. She just stood there, looking like a Wi-Fi router trying to process too much information at once. But I didn't press the advantage. Not yet. Because this night wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. And as Richard fumed, Karen panicked, and the tow truck driver tried not to laugh while examining the remains of their SUV, I realized something important. Whoever was behind these hedge attacks wasn't just being petty. They were being deliberate, strategic, and careless enough to get caught, and now that I finally had evidence, I was ready for phase 2 of my plan. Find out why they wanted my hedge gone in the first place. Because this wasn't just HOA nonsense anymore. This was something bigger, and whatever it was, I was going to expose it. If you've never watched a grown man try to explain to his wife how he just totaled their SUV by driving into a hedge, let me tell you, it's a beautiful experience. Shakespeare wishes he wrote scenes like this. I stood there on my porch, arms folded, enjoying the show like it was premium cable. Karen was pacing back and forth, waving her hands in the air like she was conducting an orchestra made entirely of bad decisions. Richard, how did this happen? She screeched. Richard pointed at my yard like it owed him money. The hedge is booby-trapped. I almost clapped. Truly. The level of irony was exquisite. Booby-trapped, Karen repeated. Josh, is that true? I shrugged. Only if you consider having a solid foundation a trap. Maybe the car just wasn't expecting the hedge to fight back. The tow truck driver snorted, loudly. Now, a normal HOA president, if such a creature exists, would have taken a step back and reassessed the situation. Maybe asked if everyone was okay. Maybe wondered why a hedge was repeatedly hit. But Karen, no. Karen operated on an entirely different frequency, one powered by caffeine, self-importance, and unchecked authority. She marched up my driveway, heels sinking into the dirt like angry little anchors. Josh, she said, voice trembling with indignation, this is sabotage. I blinked. Karen, you've run a car into my property 4 times. We have done no such. 3 times at night. Once during lunch hour. Twice while I was home. I mean, if you're going to deny it, at least put some effort into the lie. She froze. For the first time, I saw a crack in her perfect HOA armor. A split second where her eyes darted toward Richard, then back at me. Guilt, panic, the realization that she had absolutely no poker face, hard to tell. But then she recomposed herself, straightened her blazer, and said, Josh, nobody here is trying to harm you, just the hedge, I asked. It's an eyesore. So is your flamingo, but I've never hit it with my truck. The tow truck driver lost it again. Once the SUV was loaded and dragged away, looking like someone tried to fold it in half, the circus finally left my yard. I went back inside, poured myself a victory cup of coffee, and sat down with the headlight fragment like it was a sacred trophy. But even though watching Karen malfunction had been immensely satisfying, something felt off. Why go through all this trouble? Why run into my hedge repeatedly? Why destroy their own vehicle? There had to be a bigger motive. Because as annoying as Karen was, she wasn't stupid, evil, maybe, petty, absolutely, but stupid. No. So I decided to do some investigating. First stop, my friend Dave's auto shop. Dave is the kind of guy who knows everything about cars, everyone in the county, and every rumor within a 30-mile radius. He's basically the Google of small-town mechanics. If Google also smelled like oil and barbecue, I walked into his shop, holding the headlight fragment in a plastic bag, like it was evidence in a crime show. Dave took one look at it and whistled. Damn. Josh, this is from a reinforced front-end SUV. Not your everyday soccer mom ride. This is the type of thing contractors, security guys, or paranoid millionaires drive. Paranoid millionaire? I muttered. That sounds about right. He chuckled. Funny thing, someone brought in a busted-up SUV earlier today. Same brand, same model, same kind of front-end damage. He leaned in. Guess who dropped it off? Who? Karen Douglas? I wasn't surprised, but the confirmation felt good. Like the universe handing me a gift basket labeled, "You were right. Congratulations. On your petty victory. Anything else?" I asked. Dave hesitated, which immediately meant yes. Well, he said slowly, I overheard her talking to someone on the phone, kept mentioning a guy named Langford, sounded heated. Something about deadlines, approvals, permits, and you. I froze. Me. Yeah. Something like, he won't budge, and we need that lot cleared. Didn't catch everything, but she didn't sound like she was talking about just a hedge. I thanked him, left the shop, and sat in my truck for a good minute, absorbing that information. Langford. The name sounded familiar. Then I remembered, he was a developer, a big one, a guy who bought land, tore everything down, built overpriced condos, and sold them to people who said things like, "We love the charm of this community," right before ruining the charm of that community, if Karen was working with him. Suddenly, everything made sense. The hedge, the pressure, the threats, the SUV drive-bys. They didn't want me to trim the hedge. They wanted me to leave. And if they were willing to destroy a car just to get me to move, this was bigger than HOA drama. This was corruption. The next day, I confronted Karen, not angrily, not loudly, calmly. The kind of calm that scares people because they know it's covering something dangerous underneath. I found her at the mailbox cluster, pretending to check envelopes while actually spying on everyone else's postage. "Morning, Karen," I said. She jumped. "Oh, Josh, hello." She smiled way too fast, like someone who practices expressions in a mirror. "Quick question," I said. "Why is a real estate developer named Langford interested in my property?" Her smile died instantly, gone, evaporated. "Who?" she asked. "Karen," I sighed. "I know you hired someone to run into my hedge. I know you've been pushing me to remove it. I know you've been filing bogus violations. And now I know you're talking about my property behind my back." Her eyes flicked around the street like she was searching for escape routes. "Josh, it's complicated." "No," I said. "It's simple. Tell me why." She took a deep breath, shoulders sinking, and just like that, Karen, the fierce HOA queen, enemy of hedges everywhere, looked small. "Langford wants to develop this street," she said quietly. "He wants to buy the properties on this end, yours included. And you're helping him," I said. She nodded, embarrassed. "He promised incentives for the HOA, improvements, budget increases, influence. And what's the incentive for you personally?" She winced. "Ah," I said. "There it is." "I didn't have a choice," she said quickly. "He pushed, he pressured. And then when you didn't agree to remove your hedge, he said to apply more pressure. I never thought he'd actually drive a car into my yard 4 times. I asked. She grimaced. "Yeah." I stared at her for a moment, trying to decide if I should feel angry or impressed at the sheer stupidity of her plan. Then something in her expression shifted. Fear. Real. Legitimate fear. "Josh," she whispered, "you don't understand. Langford isn't the kind of man you can just say no to." "Well," I said, "guess what? I already did." She looked like she wanted to scream. "You need to drop this," she insisted. "Just sell your house, walk away, before this gets worse." "Worse," I repeated. "Karen, your husband already demolished his own SUV." "That's not what I mean," she said. "Langford won't stop, not until he gets what he wants." I walked closer, lowered my voice. "And what I want," I said, "is the truth." Karen swallowed hard, then leaned in and whispered, "He's coming tonight." That chilled me more than I expected, but I smiled anyway. Good. I said. Let him come. I'm ready. Because now I wasn't just fighting for a hedge, I was fighting to expose something much, much bigger. When Karen told me that Langford, the mysterious developer pulling the HOA's strings, was coming tonight, I expected something dramatic. Maybe a convoy of blacked-out SUVs, maybe a helicopter landing in my cul-de-sac, maybe Karen showing up again with a smoke bomb and a megaphone. Honestly, nothing could surprise me at this point. But what actually showed up was one guy in a suit at 9:47 p.m., no entourage, no theatrics, just a man who looked like he practiced saying, "I'm disappointed in you," in front of the mirror every night before bed. I was sitting on my porch drinking decaf, because if I drank real coffee at that hour, I'd stay awake until Christmas, when he walked up the driveway like he owned the place. I didn't even hear a car pull up. He just appeared, like a judgmental woodland creature that migrated toward conflict. "Mr. Mackenzie," he asked. "Depends," I replied. "Are you offering money, trouble, or Girl Scout cookies?" He didn't laugh, not even a courtesy smile. Tough crowd. "My name is Paul Langford," he said, extending a hand he clearly expected me to shake. I looked at the hand, then at him, then back at the hand. "Sorry," I said. "I don't shake hands with people whose cars keep ending up in my hedge." His hand slowly withdrew. His expression didn't change, but his eyes did just a flicker, like he was mentally writing me into his burn book. "I'm here," he said carefully, "to offer you a solution. Does it involve replacing my hedge? Because that'd be a great start." "Mr. Mackenzie," he said, voice too calm, "I'm trying to avoid conflict." "Really?" I raised a brow. "Your henchman drove into my property 4 times. You're not avoiding conflict. You're in a committed relationship with it." Again, no smile. This guy had the sense of humor of a malfunctioning vending machine. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper. It looked expensive, the kind of paper rich people use to write birthday cards that somehow come across as insulting. "This," he said, handing it to me, "is a revised buyout offer." I didn't take it. "A what?" "A generous one," he continued. 3 times the market value of your home, no strings attached." Ah, so that was the game? They weren't just trying to annoy me. They were trying to push me out, force me to sell, clear the way for development. I finally took the paper, not to read it, just to dramatically crumple it in my fist. "Not interested," I said. There was a 3-second pause where the entire atmosphere changed. His face didn't move, but the temperature dropped at least 7 degrees. If villains could do weather effects, this was his. "You should reconsider," he said softly. "Pretty sure I just did." He stepped closer. "Mr. Mackenzie, my associates and I would prefer to handle this peacefully, but if you continue resisting, things may become unpredictable." Unpredictable? The word hung in the air like a neon sign that read, "Threat, threat, this is a threat." I leaned forward. "Is this the part where you tell me to think about my future?" in a scary voice. A vein twitched in his forehead. He took a step back, smooth and controlled. "Sleep on it," he said. "This offer won't remain open long." And just like that, he walked away. No car, no sound, nothing. He disappeared between 2 houses like a ghost with a 401. I went inside, locked the door, and said out loud to my empty kitchen, "Well, that was fun. But here's the thing. I may make jokes, but I'm not stupid. When a developer with money, influence, and questionable decision-making shows up at your house, offering bribes and veiled threats, you don't just ignore it, you prepare." First, I checked my security cameras. All working, all recording, perfect. Then I backed up every clip of that SUV hitting my hedge. I saved footage of Karen's tirades, her bogus violation notices, and the moment Richard tried to blame my landscaping for attacking his vehicle like a feral animal. Next, I did what any rational adult in a messy HOA war would do. I made a sandwich. Revenge planning runs smoother when you're not hungry. 2 days passed, and I could feel the storm building. It started small. A letter taped to my door, official city envelope. Inside, a notice claiming my hedge was an unapproved landscaping obstruction and must be removed immediately. No inspection evidence, no citation code, just a threat. Cute. Then the HOA sent me 2 more violation letters. Non-standard lawn edging and excessive foliage debris. I didn't even know what that meant. My yard looked fine, better than half the houses on the street, Yet somehow I was now a one-man environmental hazard. Then true masterpiece, a tire on my truck mysteriously went flat overnight. Perfectly sliced, neat, professional, oh yes. Things were becoming unpredictable. But the final straw was finding my garage door open one afternoon. Tools everywhere, workbench flipped, papers scattered like someone had auditioned for the role of obnoxious home invader. And, in the middle of the mess, a brick, with a note tied around it, last chance. I held the brick like it was the world's angriest bowling trophy. Now, I'm not proud of what I said next, but I'll admit it. Okay, now I'm pissed. Because this wasn't about a hedge anymore. This wasn't about property lines. This wasn't even about Karen. As much as she loved starring in her own villain arc, this was about intimidation. Real intimidation. Langford's kind. So I did what he least expected. I didn't fight him directly. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten back. I went for something far more terrifying. I called my friend in IT. Now, my friend Joel isn't just good with computers. He's the type of guy who can find your childhood online username from 2007 based on your favorite pizza topping. He works in cybersecurity and collects information the way some people collect stamps. Joel, I said, I need you to do a deep dive on a guy named Paul Langford. There was a pause. How deep? Atlantis. Joel understood immediately. For the next 24 hours, we worked like two middle-aged men who had nothing left to lose and too much free time. We gathered public records, business filings, financial disclosures, zoning applications. We traced property connections, board memberships, HOA donations, and what we found, glorious, Langford wasn't just a shady developer. He was a very shady developer. Money laundering allegations, suspicious partnerships, fake permits, illegal zoning manipulations, and connections with HOA leadership, multiple HOAs across multiple neighborhoods, including ours, at 2:14 a.m. Joel sent me the message that changed everything. Josh, he's already submitted preliminary development plans for your block. 6 months ago. 6 months. Before any of this started, before the first Hedge incident, before Karen began her crusade, the goal had never been to fix aesthetic issues. The goal was to remove obstacles like homeowners who refused to sell. My hedge wasn't the real target, my property was. And now that I knew the truth, everything became clear. I wasn't dealing with an HOA bully, I was dealing with a corporate bulldozer wearing a suit. Well, lucky for me, I had just sharpened my shovel. Now, I'm not a genius. I'm not even the smartest person on my block. That honor probably goes to the retired math teacher who once corrected a street sign with a Sharpie. But even I knew one thing. When a shady developer threatens you, destroys your property, and somehow uses the HOA president as his personal errand girl, you don't fight him with fists. No, you fight him with information, and I suddenly had a mountain of it. I spent the next morning sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by printouts like a conspiracy theorist who finally connected the red strings on his corkboard. There were fake permits, zoning violations, suspicious transactions, emails between Langford and HOA board members, and blueprint drafts that looked like they were drawn by someone who slept through architecture class but still wanted to break laws creatively. I organized everything in folders labeled things like illegal stuff, more illegal stuff, and stuff to scare Langford with later, very professional. Now, I knew better than to take all this to the police. The police in our town can barely handle 4th of July fireworks complaints. They're not built for white-collar HOA corruption. But reporters? Oh, reporters live for this. I composed the most dramatic anonymous email of my life. It practically sparkled with righteous fury. I attached all the evidence, every document, every recording, every screenshot, every clip of the SUV ramming into my hedge, like it was competing in a demolition derby. Then, with the confidence of a man who'd reached maximum pettiness, I hit send. Not to one news outlet, not to two, but to every major news station within 300 miles. If Langford wanted to play the intimidation game, he should have picked someone who was intimidatable. By noon, the first reporter called. By 2, the story was trending. By 4, the city council released a statement saying they were looking into the matter, which is politician speak for, oh crap, we're in trouble. But the best part? Oh, that came at 5:46 p.m. because That's when Karen showed up. She stormed up my driveway like a bright pink thundercloud, breathing so heavily I thought she might pass out. Her hair was a mess. Her blazer was crooked, and she didn't have her clipboard, which is how I knew she was truly rattled. "Josh," she yelled, without even knocking, "open this door right now." I opened it halfway so she couldn't shove her way in. She absolutely would have tried. And there she was, HOA, Queen Karen, dethroned, deflated, and one minor inconvenience away from collapsing into a pile of lawsuits. "What's up, Karen?" I asked sweetly. She stabbed a finger toward my chest, "have no idea what you've done." "Oh, I think I do." Her eyes were wild. "Langford is furious. The entire project is in jeopardy. The investors are pulling out." "Oh no," I gasped. "Not the investors." "This isn't funny," she snapped. "He's blaming me." "Well," I shrugged, "you did help him." Her face scrunched into a look somewhere between guilt and constipation. "I didn't think you'd actually expose him." "Who does that?" "People who don't like having their hedges rammed by SUVs, I said. She groaned and ran both hands through her hair. "You need to fix this," she pleaded. "Take down whatever you sent, contact the news, tell them it's wrong." "Karen," I said, "you're asking me to lie to protect a criminal." "He's not a criminal," she began, then caught herself mid-sentence. "Okay, he's technically a criminal, but no buts." Her shoulders slumped, her voice softened. "Josh, you don't understand. Langford isn't just some guy in a suit. He's persistent. That's one word for it. He doesn't forget things, he doesn't forgive things, he doesn't lose. And now, because of you, he's going to come after me." Ah, there it was, fear. For the first time since this whole ordeal started, Karen wasn't angry, she wasn't smug, she wasn't bossy, she was scared, and honestly, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. "Karen," I said gently, "I'm not the enemy here. You are the one who got involved with him. You let him pressure you, you let him use the HOA, and now you're realizing he's not the kind of guy you can just block on Facebook and move on from." She collapsed into the patio chair like someone unplugged her. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "He wanted the land. He said if I didn't help, he'd make things difficult." "And what about me?" I asked. "You made things plenty difficult for me," she winced. "I'm sorry, Josh. I really am. I just didn't think it would go this far." "Well," I said, "it did." She hesitated, then looked up at me with this expression that said she wanted to tell me something but wasn't sure if she should. "Last night," she finally whispered, "a black SUV was parked outside your house for nearly an hour." I froze, watching. She nodded. "Waiting? I don't think he's done." Now, normally, that would shake me. A mysterious SUV stalking my property. Not exactly comforting, but after weeks of HOA warfare, mysterious Hedge attacks, and Langford's awkward villain monologue at my doorstep, I was more annoyed than scared. I grabbed my phone, pulled up my security camera footage, found the clip, and turned the screen toward her. "You mean this one?" She nearly fell out of the chair. You have footage." "Karen," I said, "I record everything. I'm a middle-aged man in an HOA neighborhood. This is my sport." She looked like she might faint, so I decided to help by making things worse. "Smile," I said, tapping the screen. A red light blinked. "Are you recording me?" She shrieked. "Yep, why, in case you try something stupid later." She made a strangled noise somewhere between a gasp and a goose honk, then bolted off my porch like a disgraced raccoon fleeing the trash cans it knocked over, and honestly, I thought that was the end of it. But oh no, because the next morning, everything exploded. Local news vans lined the street, neighbors gathered like this was a premier event, HOA board members were resigning theatrically, some of them probably didn't even know what they were resigning from. Police cars rolled past, city officials arrived with clipboards that looked like they actually contained useful information. By lunchtime, one headline was everywhere. Developer linked to HOA corruption investigation. City expands inquiry after new evidence emerges. And then came the best part. At 3:14 p.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. Developer Paul Langford arrested on multiple charges, including fraud, bribery, and harassment. I stared at the notification for a long moment. Then I whispered, "Told you?" Karen didn't show up that day, or the next. Rumor had it she was hiding at her sister's house, trying to figure out how to explain to her book club that she accidentally helped commit a felony. Meanwhile, the HOA disintegrated faster than cotton candy in a rainstorm. Meetings were canceled, fines were voided. The newsletter lady resigned in protest, claiming creative differences, which I think was code for I refuse to live in a community without drama. As for me, I did what any victorious homeowner would do. I replanted my hedge, and this time, it grew back stronger than ever. When Langford's arrest hit the news, you could practically feel the shockwave move through the neighborhood. I swear, even the lawn gnomes looked stunned. People who'd barely made eye contact with me for years suddenly waved from their porches like we were old friends who survived a shipwreck together. For the first time since this whole mess began, the street felt calm. No mystery SUVs circling. No bogus HOA letters taped to my door like threatening fortune cookies. No Karen marching around with her clipboard like she was policing a mall Santa line. Just peace and quiet. Lots of quiet. It was so quiet, in fact, that I got suspicious. Then, at exactly 8:12 a.m., Karen appeared. Like a timid, soggy, defeated flamingo in a pink cardigan. She walked slowly this time, not the usual power stride, not the I control this street march, but the walk of someone who'd been hit by both embarrassment and reality. She stood at the edge of my yard, looking like she was waiting to be struck by lightning. I stepped outside, because, let's be honest, I absolutely wanted to hear whatever was about to come out of her mouth. "Josh," she said softly. Well, I replied. The queen of the HOA emerges from the bunker. She didn't react. She just looked exhausted. Not dramatic, not angry, just drained, like someone who had finally run out of excuses, justifications, and caffeine. "I came to apologize," she said. It was so unexpected that I looked around to check if this was a prank. Maybe the neighbors had hired actors. Maybe TV cameras were hidden in the bushes. Maybe this was one of those social experiments. But no, it was genuinely Karen. She took a deep breath. What I did was wrong. All of it. I let Langford push me around. I let the HOA become something it wasn't supposed to be. And I made your life miserable because it was easier than standing up to him. That last line actually hit me a little, because for all the jokes, neighbor wars, and petty drama, she was right. Karen wasn't some master villain. She was someone who got manipulated by a bigger shark and decided to become a piranha to survive. "Karen," I said, "you didn't just make my life miserable. You terrorized my hedge." She actually laughed, a small one, sad but real. "Yeah," she said, "I did." For a moment we stood there in a silence that was almost civil. Then she said, "They dissolved the HOA this morning." "It's over." "Oh," I said, feigning shock. No more lawn height inspections, no more letters about the emotional state of my shrubbery, no more street committee meetings that feel like hostage negotiations. She cracked a tiny smile. "You're free." That was the moment it sunk in. The HOA, the source of all this chaos, was gone. Poof. Erased like a typo in the neighborhood's history. I should have felt triumphant, victorious, like conquering hero Josh, destroyer of corruption. Instead, I felt something closer to relief. Deep, profound relief. The kind you only feel after a very long, very stupid battle finally ends. Karen sighed. "Josh, I know there's no reason you'd forgive me, but I am sorry." And to my surprise, I believed her. "Yeah," I said. "I know." She nodded, then walked away slowly, quietly, like someone who finally realized being HOA president didn't make her a queen, just a person with a little too much time and authority. When she disappeared down the street, I turned to look at my yard, the patch of ground that had suffered the most in this war. And without meaning to, I started laughing. Because after everything, after the SUV attacks, after the nights of stakeouts, after the threats, the fines, the chaos, I was finally free to plant whatever I wanted, however I wanted, without Karen's commentary. So, naturally, I grabbed my gardening gloves. Rebuilding the hedge wasn't just about restoring plants. It was symbolic. It was a promise to myself that no HOA, no developer, no clipboard-wielding suburban tyrant would ever push me off my land again. I dug into the soil like a man possessed, humming victory music under my breath. I replanted each shrub with pride, spacing them perfectly, watering them generously, talking to them like they'd been through a traumatic event. "There you go, little buddy," I whispered to one. You're safe now. No more SUV jousting tournaments. And, you know what? It actually felt good. Therapeutic, even. By late afternoon, the new hedge was standing tall, straight, green, beautiful, and free of tire marks. A miracle. As I admired my handiwork, my neighbor from across the street, Miss Henderson, shuffled over with her cane and her eternal wisdom. "Looks lovely," she said. "Hope it stays up longer than the last one. If another SUV hits this hedge," I said, "I'm moving to the forest." She nodded. "Probably safer there." That evening, something unexpected happened. For the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. No engines revving, no crash noises, no suspicious shadows outside my window. The night was quiet, calm, and for the first time since this whole mess started completely uneventful, it was bliss. The next morning, I woke up, stepped outside, and saw a small card taped to my mailbox. My heart dropped for half a second. Old habits die hard, but it wasn't a violation notice. It was a handwritten apology. From Karen, short, honest, humble. "I'm starting over," it said. "Thank you for standing up when I didn't." Character development? Didn't expect that in this HOA saga. I pocketed the note, took a deep breath, and admired my hedge, perfect, untouched, thriving. And that's when it really hit me. I won. Not just the hedge war, not just the HOA showdown, not just the battle against Langford, the world's most boring villain. I won my home back. And there's no feeling quite like that. When you live in a neighborhood ruled by an out-of-control HOA, it's easy to feel powerless, like the rules are stacked against you, like someone else controls your peace, your home, your sanity. But here's the truth. Bullies, whether they're in fancy suits or holding clipboards, count on your silence. Stand up once, and they panic. Stand up twice, and they crumble. Expose them, and they disappear. This whole mess taught me something simple but powerful. You don't win by shouting. You win by documenting, by staying calm, by refusing to fold when someone tries to push you out of your own life. If you're watching this, tell me in the comments, has an HOA or neighbor ever pushed you too far? What happened? And hey, if you enjoy watching petty villains get exactly what they deserve, make sure to subscribe. Trust me, there are plenty more stories where this one came from.